Welcome to Middle East Briefing. The content of the briefing includes how Yemen's military entrepreneurs drew U.S. into Middle East combat. Blinken meets with Abbas to talk about Gaza's future. Devastated, heartbroken, against the odds, Gaza aid providers keep going. Live updates: Blinken seeks more aid for Gaza as hostage talks restart in Egypt. The Israeli right undermines Biden's Middle East agenda. How Yemen's military entrepreneurs drew U.S. into Middle East combat. Financial Times. Houthi rebels in Yemen have become one of the most active factions in Iran's axis of resistance since the Israel-Hamas conflict began on October 7. The rebels have targeted merchant ships, disrupting shipping in a key maritime trade route and involving the U.S. Navy in combat. They have also attacked the southern Israeli port of Eilat with drones and missiles. The Houthis have created a significant challenge for the U.S. and its allies, who want to protect shipping lanes while avoiding a broader regional war. The U.S. has increased its Red Sea Maritime Task Force, but Western warships only have a finite stock of interceptor missiles to destroy projectiles. Once these missiles are used, ships must return to base to resupply. However, perception of the security provided by the task force will affect the success of convoy operations. As insurers increase premiums, it becomes more economical for shipping companies to reroute their vessels. The U.S. has accused Iran of being deeply involved in planning the Houthi attacks, but Iran insists that militant groups in its axis of resistance act independently. Blinken meets with Abbas to talk about Gaza's future. New York Times. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has met with Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas to discuss the role the authority might play in Gaza following the recent conflict with Israel. The Biden administration has said it envisions a role for the Palestinian Authority in governing both the West Bank and Gaza. President Biden has also said Israel must allow for the formation of a Palestinian state. However, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and his government have rejected the notion of a Palestinian state and any substantial role for the authority in Gaza. Blinken's visit to the region also includes talks in Bahrain and Egypt. Devastated, heartbroken, against the odds, Gaza aid providers keep going. Al Jazeera. The United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, is struggling to fulfill its mission in Gaza, where it has suffered the highest ever death toll for any UN agency in a war. At least 146 UNRWA staffers have been killed in Israeli bombings, and others have lost their homes and family members. The agency provides critical services such as education and healthcare to Palestinians in Gaza and other regions. However, the current war has caused unprecedented destruction and displacement, with an estimated 1.9 million people forced to leave their homes since October 7. UNRWA-run facilities are sheltering 1.4 million internally displaced people, including UNRWA staff and their families. The agency is also facing accusations from Israel that its staff has links to Hamas, but UNRWA's leadership is focused on providing humanitarian aid in the midst of the crisis. The Qatari Committee for the Reconstruction of Gaza, QCRG, is also facing challenges in delivering aid and implementing infrastructure projects due to the ongoing war. The QCRG has contributed $74 million to UNRWA and has invested $2.1 billion in the Gaza Strip since 2012, but its projects have also been targeted in Israeli air raids. The situation in Gaza is dire, with severe damage to infrastructure, a shortage of food aid, and a lack of clean water and sanitation facilities. The UNRWA and other aid providers are facing significant challenges in delivering aid and rebuilding Gaza, but they remain committed to helping the people of Gaza despite the difficult circumstances. Live updates: Blinken seeks more aid for Gaza as hostage talks restart in Egypt. Associated Press. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken is in the Middle East seeking governance reforms from the Palestinian President, Mahmoud Abbas, as part of a plan to rally the region behind a post-war vision for Gaza that includes concrete steps towards a Palestinian state. Blinken has said that multiple countries in the region have committed to assisting with rebuilding and governing Gaza after the war against Hamas, but only if there is a pathway to a Palestinian state. Hamas' attack from Gaza into southern Israel on October 7 triggered the war, and Israel's air, ground and sea assault on Gaza has killed more than 2,300 people, two-thirds of them women and children, according to the health ministry in the Hamas-ruled territory. The Israeli right undermines Biden's Middle East agenda. Washington Post. The Biden administration is trying to navigate the difficult path of supporting Israel in its conflict with Hamas while mitigating the humanitarian crisis in Gaza and containing the conflict. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been delivering messages from Arab counterparts to Israel, urging them to scale back their military operations and expand humanitarian assistance to the population in Gaza. The Biden administration is also pushing for substantive engagement and investment from Israel's Arab neighbors, the return of non-Hamas Palestinian administrative rule to Gaza, and the revival of a political track for the two-state solution. However, the far-right coalition led by Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu is obstructing these efforts. Proponents argue that Netanyahu wants to drag out the war in Gaza to appease his far-right allies and may even consider further escalation on the northern front. The Biden administration is also facing the reality that the lack of political and civil rights for Palestinians living under Israeli occupation can no longer be ignored. The Biden administration had hoped to prioritize Israel's normalization of ties with Saudi Arabia and shift its focus to the Asia-Pacific and the challenges posed by a rising China. However, the conflict in Gaza and the Israeli far right are forcing the Biden administration to confront these issues. Could the Houthi attacks on the Red Sea cause a global crisis? The Independent. Yemen's Houthi rebels have carried out their largest ever aerial attack on ships in the Red Sea, raising concerns that global trade and energy prices could be affected. 21 missiles and drones were fired at warships and commercial vessels near the Bab al-Mandab Strait. The Houthis have been targeting commercial vessels since October 2014 and have vowed to continue their assaults until Israel halts the conflict in Gaza. Israel's genocide trial isn't what it seems. Bloomberg. Israel will defend itself against genocide allegations at the International Court of Justice, ICJ, on January 11. The ICJ, a court that allows governments to address issues by suing each other under international law, rather than going to war, changed its rules in 2022 to enable any country to sue another country if it can show an interest in international law being followed. South Africa is suing Israel, asking the court to issue a provisional order directing Israel to stop military operations in Gaza. The ICJ can make such an order, but enforcement would have to come from the UN Security Council, where the US wields a veto. South Africa takes Israel to court. Foreign policy. South Africa has taken its case against Israel to the International Court of Justice, ICJ, alleging that Israel's military assault on Gaza constituted genocide. The case comes after Israel was accused of carrying out mass atrocities, which included ethnic cleansing and rape, by Sudan's Rapid Support Forces, RSF. The RSF is led by Mohammed Hamdan Hemedi Dagalo, who is currently touring African countries. The ICJ will decide whether to proceed with the case, which could set legal precedent. Israel has been boycotting the International Criminal Court, but as it is a signatory of the Genocide Convention, it cannot boycott the ICJ. Blinken tells Abbas US backs tangible steps for Palestinian state. South China Morning Post. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken has told Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas that the U.S. supports tangible steps towards the creation of a Palestinian state. Blinken also urged Israel to engage with the region on post-war Gaza, and called on Israel to hand over revenues owed to the Palestinians in full. The Israeli government has shown no interest in reviving negotiations, and the Palestinian leadership remains split between the Palestinian Authority and Hamas. U.S. brokered talks on a Palestinian state in territory now occupied by Israel collapsed almost a decade ago. How the war with Hamas has damaged Israel's tech firms and economy. New York Times. The recent war between Israel and Hamas has severely impacted Israel's economy, with the technology sector particularly affected. The war disrupted operations at many companies, leading to customer orders being put on hold or cancelled and investors becoming hesitant. Israel's technology sector, which has grown rapidly over the past decade and accounts for almost half of all exports and a fifth of economic output, has been significantly affected. The war has caused a temporary but pronounced slowdown of Israel's economy, with growth expected to slow to 1.5% this year, down from 3% before the war. Other factors impacting the economy include labor shortages, lower consumer and business confidence, and higher inflation. The war has also hurt Israel's tourism industry, which has come to a standstill and resulted in higher government spending. To stimulate the economy, the Bank of Israel has cut interest rates and the government is planning to increase the number of foreign workers allowed in the country. The war has also led to a decline in construction activity and disrupted supply chains due to attacks in Yemen. Ladies and gentlemen, I am Dr. Six, your resident observer from the 6 Degrees world, here to bring you the latest news from around the globe. Today, we discussed a range of topics, including the role of Houthi rebels in Yemen, the efforts to rebuild Gaza, the Israeli rights impact on U.S. Middle East policy, the Houthi attacks on the Red Sea, Israel's upcoming genocide trial, and the economic impact of the recent conflict. Let's start with the Houthi rebels in Yemen. These rebels have become a significant challenge for the US and its allies as they disrupt shipping in a key maritime trade route and involve the US Navy in combat. The US has accused Iran of being involved in planning the Houthi attacks, but Iran insists that these militant groups act independently. This situation highlights the complexity of the Middle East and the delicate balance of power in the region. Moving on to Gaza, the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees, UNRWA, and other aid providers are facing significant challenges in delivering aid and rebuilding Gaza. The recent war has caused unprecedented destruction and displacement, leaving millions of people in need of critical services such as education and healthcare. Despite these challenges, these organizations remain committed to helping the people of Gaza and providing humanitarian aid in the midst of the crisis. In terms of U.S. involvement, Secretary of State Antony Blinken has been meeting with Palestinian Authority leader Mahmoud Abbas to discuss the role the authority might play in Gaza's future. The Biden administration envisions a role for the Palestinian Authority in governing both the West Bank and Gaza and is pushing for tangible steps towards the creation of a Palestinian state. However, the Israeli government's rejection of these notions and the influence of the Israeli far right are posing obstacles to these efforts. We also discussed the Houthi attacks on the Red Sea, which raise concerns about the potential impact on global trade and energy prices. The Houthis have been targeting commercial vessels in the Red Sea, and their recent aerial attack has escalated these concerns. This situation highlights the interconnectedness of the global economy and the potential for regional conflicts to have far-reaching consequences. Turning to the legal arena, Israel is set to defend itself against genocide allegations at the International Court of Justice, ICJ. South Africa has taken its case against Israel to the ICJ, accusing Israel of genocide and asking the court to issue a provisional order directing Israel to stop military operations in Gaza. This case could set legal precedent and further complicate the already complex dynamics of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Lastly, we discussed the economic impact of the recent conflict on Israel's tech firms and economy. The war has severely disrupted operations in many companies, leading to a slowdown in economic growth and impacting Israel's technology sector, which has been a driving force behind its economy. The war has also hurt Israel's tourism industry and resulted in higher government spending. To stimulate the economy, the Bank of Israel has cut interest rates, and the government is planning to increase the number of foreign workers allowed in the country. In conclusion, the situation in the Middle East remains complex and volatile, with various actors and factions vying for power and influence. The recent conflict in Gaza and its aftermath have highlighted the challenges faced by aid providers, the need for diplomatic efforts to rebuild and govern Gaza, and the potential economic consequences of regional conflicts. As always, we welcome your thoughts and questions. What are your perspectives on these issues? Thank you for tuning in. The content above showcases the latest briefing reports and analytical synopses, thoughtfully curated by the 6Do team. These insights stem from a wide array of reputable media outlets, think tanks, government sources, and specialized experts worldwide. We encourage you to explore these sources for a comprehensive perspective. Keep in mind that while the content may not always align with the official standpoint of 6Do Brief, it's not meant to be taken as absolute directives for decision-making. Comprising seasoned media professionals, learned scholars, and accomplished scientists, the 6Do team embodies a trailblazing, fully independent media entity. To customize 6Do Brief to meet your professional needs, you have the option to subscribe to a diverse array of briefings on our website, 6dobrief.com. Regardless of your location, you can conveniently receive 6Do Brief via email.